Hi folks, are you ready to start creating film, TV and animation content with the Epic ecosystem of tools? Read our new Getting Started guide and learn how to get set up with Unreal Engine, MetaHuman, Reality Capture and more. Head to unrealengine.com/explainers for more. Our latest developer interview with Keelworks, the studio behind Signy, All Guns Blazing, showcases a fantastic journey for the studio, with one founder transitioning from working at Pixar to creating a blistering shoot-'em-up experience inspired by the classics. Learn more about their processes and how Unreal Engine aided their development at unrealengine.com/feed. The v25.30 release for Creative and Unreal Editor for Fortnite has landed, featuring dozens of fixes and new features for UEFN, Verse, and devices. Check out the full notes at dev.epicgames.com/community, and if you haven't already, download UEFN from your launcher and try it today. Digging up this week's Community Spotlights with a fantastic documentary made entirely with Unreal Engine 5, using metahumans and a host of new generation tools. Grab your shovels and learn about King Tutankhamun, the youngest Egyptian pharaoh. Uncover the tale over on Bad Decision Studios' YouTube channel. The second spotlight of the week comes courtesy of environment and level artist Yannick Godot and their latest project that takes inspiration from marvelous and classical cathedrals across the globe. They used various tools to craft and put together this impressive environment, showcasing their ability and talent. Let them know what you think of Barracu Cathedral over on their art station. We're excited to introduce an upcoming third-person, open-world action-adventure platformer game from Genius Slackers. In the vibrant world of nunnish punk, take on the role of a courageous hero adventuring through a thrilling ecosystem to confront the rebels hell-bent on destroying society as you know it. Follow the game's journey over on the forums. Thanks for watching this week's news and Community Spotlight.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Inside Unreal, a weekly show where we learn, explore, and celebrate everything Unreal. I am your host, Tina, and today with me I have two of the incredible developers behind Errant Photon and their collection of plugins, also known as Errant Worlds, which we're going to be diving into today. But just to get right into the meat of it, because there's so much to go into, and I'm personally just very excited to get there as well. Let's start off with some introductions. So, Adam, let's start with you. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself?
Hello, I'm Adam. I'm a founder and developer at Errant Photon. I'm mostly behind Biomes and Landscape plugins. I've been in the industry for, I don't know, like 8 years already. I started as an artist, then I went as a technical artist, and now I mostly do programming and directing the company.
No big deal, just small little jobs to do here and there. And then next we have Daniel. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself as well?
Yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, so I have about a decade of professional experience in game dev in companies like Techland and Sumo Digital. And before that, I was like a big graphics nerd, doing like shaders and, for many, many years, and ray tracing. Also very much into physics and vehicle simulation. And now, also world generation and procedural generation. I would rather say that I'm pretty much excited about almost anything, related to games and developing them. Audio, if I only had time to play with. Yeah, but today we'll be talking about procedural generation. And yeah, I'm also like co-manage the company with Adam, of course.
Very cool. Well, I'm very excited to dive into what you all brought today. Just for context, for anyone who's unfamiliar with the topic of today, do you mind giving just kind of a brief overview, summary of what Errant Worlds is and what we're going to be looking at today?
Yes, of course. So Errant Worlds is a set of free plugins for Unreal Engine that allow you to create landscapes, biomes, and paths, roads, quite easily with help of procedural generation, GPU accelerated. Yeah, it's just the best tools we can come up for making worlds, pretty much. And we'll go into details of because we started doing these tools because we were dissatisfied with everything else that we were using at the time. This were like using tools outside of the editor, and so we wanted to move all the tools to the editor and provide like runtime non-destructive editing, and that's how the product was born. Of course, it took several years to get to this stage. So we'll proudly present what we've got.
Awesome. I'm really excited to see. What do you mean? It didn't just take a couple of days to build these entire procedural generation programs you have?
I have to say we overshoot the initial estimations by a factor of 5.
Many times that we could have made all of the maps that we can now procedurally generate like 3 times, 3 times over. We could have made whole worlds by hand by the time we figured those plugins, but I hope it's worth it.
Yeah. Well, I can already imagine that it is, but I'm excited to see the tools in action and see how it goes, and we can see for ourselves. You ready to dive in? I know I am.
Yeah, I am. Let's go to screen sharing. Okay, so Errant Worlds is a set of pre-plugins, as I said, for landscape, for sculpting the landscape and painting weight maps. Then we have biomes for placing foliage, but also other kinds of objects such as lights, sounds, effects. And then we have paths for all kinds of spline-based objects, such as roads, highways, power lines, pipelines, you name it. And we have a few things we focus on when working on Errant Worlds. The first one is performance and scalability. That means we want our tools to work on like really large levels, hundreds of square kilometers with millions of objects. And of course, it's a completely new set of challenges to work with such levels compared to 1 by 1 kilometer. And so our tools often work on the GPU, and we try to make them performant both in the editor for the devs so that the work is pleasant and efficient, and for the game, of course, that the game runs smoothly. Then we also focus on balancing automation and control. Despite using procedural generation in our tools, we want the artists to feel as much control as if they were placing things by hand. Procedural generation is like the boost to your productivity, not something that aims to replace an artist. Then the third point is efficient team cooperation. We want our tools to work for indie devs and also for large teams. And in large teams, that means multiple people working on the same map in parallel, changing different things at the same time. It also means that we need to have enough granularity in assets so that people can change different aspects of the pipeline generation at the same time, avoiding storing data in some like key actors like landscape, because then only one person can check the file. And then there is programmability, another point. Instead of providing all the knobs and properties for every case we could imagine, we early on understood that this is just not possible and it clutters UI. So instead we went with programmability, where we give you like very isolated environment for programming, and you program with just nodes, something simple, anyone can do it. And with that you gain all the flexibility that comes with programming. Another point is to have a complete solution. So we try to provide all the tools you may need to create a level from scratch up to the like game ready level, and all the visualizations, debugging, everything you need. And this is in contrast to frameworks where you are given the building blocks, but you need to create your own solution on top. And this often requires way more work than you maybe imagine at the beginning. And it also also requires a lot of programming typically. With our tools, an artist can just take the tools, use them, and create great levels. And the next point is integration into the ecosystem. So we try not to like recreate parts of Unreal, until we really have to, because we want people and artists to be able to use the tools they know and they are familiar with in Unreal. So we try to work with every tool in Unreal, as much as we can. And then the first plugin that we will be showing today is Errant Landscape. It is a plugin where you can place stumps, like you see in the video. You can move them around and rotate them, scale them, and shape the landscape this way. And this plugin uses Unreal, like standard Unreal Landscape. So you can also use all the existing tools in Unreal for sculpting. And it works on large maps because we only update the area that is covered by the brush. So when you move the brush, only that element of the landscape gets updated, and it doesn't even matter how many brushes or how big the landscape is. You can have thousands of them in the level, and that's totally okay. It also supports weight map painting. So you can get, for example, splat maps from Gaia, and you can use them in your brushes to maybe place like snow cover on the mountains, or anything else that involves weight maps. It also allows multiple artists to work concurrently, so people working in different parts of the map may be moving these brushes as long as they don't overlap, and it works fine. Then it also integrates with our second plugin, Errant Biomes, in a way that it can generate biome masks, the same way you generate weight maps. And these biome masks can be then read by our Errant Biomes plugin to generate foliage. And yeah, I should also show this video. So our brushes are components, and here they are. The component of the brush is placed inside the blueprint with the house, and we are just moving the house with the brush. And the plugin also comes with a stump library, where we provide all these height maps and splat maps that you can use in your projects. It's really like enough to create like quite many levels just out of this library of brushes, and you can use the splat maps to like put snow, grass, and this type of effects. And let's now move on to Unreal, and we'll show you how the plugin works. And let's start by creating a new level. And we'll use word partition because, of course, we support it.
Yeah, for bigger worlds, you really need to use it.
That would be pretty weird if we didn't.
Yeah, we'll create the biggest landscape we can. Yeah, in the UI. Yeah. So 8 kilometers by 8 kilometers, just to show that it will work fine with any resolution.
And we are using a landscape material that we provide with the plugin, but really any landscape material is okay. We use it because we provide it, but we have no requirements regarding the landscape material. Okay, it takes a moment to create.
For such a big map, you don't have to wait a moment for it to load, right? So.
And I will add a light source, and we will use a ultra dynamic sky plugin for that.
Yeah, shout out to those guys. It's a really, really useful plugin. Just,
And yeah, well, Errant Landscape will operate on its own layer, edit layer in Landscape. So we will create it, and now we can initialize the weight maps.
Yeah, all the data in Errant Landscape will be written to this layer. So that's how you see how it integrates with the rest of the tools. You can still paint, sculpt manually on other layers. Errant Landscape will write everything to this new layer it created. That's why it also logged it, so you don't accidentally start sculpting on it and it removes your hand-painted stuff, right? And then I'll quickly add it. Weight info for weight maps that you always need to add to have a physical definition of what those materials mean and also how they are blended with each other.
Yes, and I will show you in a moment.
But if they are missing, you can just press the plus icon on the right.
So let's wait for saving. Takes longer than expected.
So
Well, I
big
mean-
map, though getting stuck on
I guess
75%
everything.
is
You're building worlds. I think it's okay for us to wait an extra 5 to 10 seconds.
yeah, maybe also
Yeah,
exit the from landscape mode. Maybe it also
Okay.
messes it up.
I was just wondering why it's still untitled here.
Oh, true. You just saved the map. I wonder why it didn't save.
And we'll show you in a moment the tool that we have for creating landscapes larger than 8 by 8 kilometers, because quite often people want to create something larger.
Yeah, when
And,
people started using
well-
Errant Landscape, and realized that really 8 by 8 is not even that big for this plugin. They asked us to create another UI that you can just go above the limits of the standard UI provided in Unreal, because you can do that now.
Yeah, as you can see, I just typed in
the-
numbers, and it's 32 by 32. We could create a landscape like that right now. That's
Yeah, but
useful.
let's go into let's play some brushes.
Yes, so in the this is the panel that from our plugin. It's you just enter it through the edit modes, and we can pick one of the brushes. They come from the library that we showed before, and let's pick something like a crater maybe. And let's place
Yeah,
it.
not that none of these brushes are special anyway. You can create your brush very easily and just add any height map and weight maps that you want it to add. And those brushes that we are just adding currently with like no fuss, they are like 2 kilometers wide brushes. Those are not less small like changes into the landscape. We are working currently on 8 by 8 kilometers landscape and just placing brushes without any problems really. As we said, as you can see those extents around, extends the brushes. Around the brushes, you can see the extents. That's the area that this brush edits. So that's the only part that gets updated as you modify the brush. So it doesn't even matter how big the landscape is, as long as your brushes don't, you don't go overboard with the sizes of the brush. Though that's also very optimized, and maybe we'll show in a moment how you can place even just 8 kilometer brush, and that will be fine.
Yes, this brush alone is like over 2 by 2 kilometers, so larger than many maps. Let's add the brush that we'll put on over the entire map.
Yeah, let's stress test it, really, test the map.
Yeah, so the brush itself is 4 by 4 kilometers, but, or no, I think it's maybe larger. Let's...
No, it's 4 by 4.
Let's reset the... Yeah, it's 4 by 4.
Yeah.
Okay, and
Yeah,
so we just covered the entire...
We just covered the entire 8 by 8 kilometers of landscape in a second. So if you tried importing sometimes like height maps into Unreal, you might have experienced how long it might take to even import such data to the landscape, and how you can now edit that basically in real time, right?
Yeah, also you can notice that there is a cutoff here because we reached the maximum that the maximum value that the landscape can store, but we have a tool that allows you to easily fix that without clicking through all the brushes. And one thing that is impressive.
Maximum height inside the landscape is stored as a Z scaling on the landscape that you created. So if you by mistake set up it too low,
you got interrupted, I think,
at the edges. Yeah, and you would need to change the Z scaling of the landscape and go over every brush and scale it down. So that's just a little helpful for that.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to show you is that you can take entire landscape and just rotate it. So 64 square kilometers updated every tick, kind of, which to me is a bit insane, but it works. Okay, so let's move these brushes a bit around.
Yeah, also,
you can.
As we said, those brushes are components, not actors, so you could easily compose them together into single bigger actors, or even combine them with your gameplay logic. So you could have, for example, a house like we showed in the video previously that always needs to have a landscape adjusted underneath. And as the game requirements change and you move it around the level, that, for example, you need to put it further inside your landmarks or something, you just move it and the landscape adjusts with it, and you always have it as a one unit.
Yeah, so you can control the modes, how these brushes blend. Right now we are in an additive mode, so everything adds on top, but we can also switch it to replace mode, and then the one brush overrides other brushes. Let's just... Oh, and that's a surprise. It's good that I saved
No, it's not a surprise. It is fixed in new version, but we are showing on the older one. Yeah, but it's fine. Anyway, the cool thing that Daniel would show if it didn't go away was the aspect that of how those brushes aren't added into a single actor. So multiple people can work at the same time adding brushes at the level, because they don't register, for example, to landscape actor. With some other tools, you might have noticed that only one person at the time can add new actors on the level, new brush actors on the level, because they need to register to the landscape, which needs to be checked out before anyone else can work, and that makes it possible only for one person to work at the time. Without plugin, none of the brushes register to any single actor. They are registered dynamically to the system, so you can freely just work at the same map with many people at the same time. The only thing that the work where the work overlaps is when they modify around the same landscape proxies. So when they modify the data of the landscape proxy, they will need to check it out. And if you're using word partition, for example, word partition template that we started with, it will automatically split the level into multiple landscape proxies for you.
Well, it wasn't a surprise for Adam, but it was for me, so...
I mean, it crashes.
Yeah, we have a older version. We wanted to show it on some stable ground, but sometimes the stable version has old bugs, so so that always can happen.
Should I enter this mode in a different way?
No, whatever. Just continue. With other stuff. It's not really that. It's more of a technical detail that we have this list with priorities of the brushes and so on. It's not that interesting.
So we showed how you can. Yeah, we showed how you can affect the height, but we can also affect weight maps. I will make this slightly larger. And first, let's see the weight map, and let's use this.
We should also do maybe just spam a lot of brushes just to show that having a ton of brushes doesn't really impact your performance.
This is something that Adam really likes, like many brushes added quickly. Well, now we have it. I mean,
I have not believing that you can have many brushes. We literally have projects where you have tens of thousands of those brushes on the level, because none of the edits on the landscape are placed manually. Like, you place on manual brush, even the small one, just to make something, just so in the future you can select all of them and move them around to another place. So really, you can have a lot of those brushes at the same time. It will be fine. They also unload properly with word partition. This is also thanks to them not registering to, for example, landscape actor or something like this. So if you have a giant world, you can safely, unload parts of them. Also, the reason we have the cool thing you might see above them is those little icons. They are fully customizable, and they are part of the solving the problem of having too many brushes. Basically, at sub-projects, you have so many of those brushes around the level that you need a way to recognize which are which. You can set some icons. You can set colors for them. You can set flying names on top of them, just so you can organize this mess of thousands of brushes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that you can turn any mountain into, a hole in the ground or a depression by inverting the value. You can also multiply and do different operations on them in here, but we won't be going over that. It's normal things.
Yeah, that's just
So
touching the surface as well. Because you can also use materials to instead of textures to create what the output. You can use splines as shape, not only textures, but we have limited time. And also, I'm sorry, it sounds kind of like I'm cutting Daniel off and every time, but we have a big delay here. So I hear him like with 10 seconds behind. So with our usual flow of just discussing things casually, it sounds kind of like I'm interrupting you all the time. Sorry.
I just wanted to show that you can, because these are components, you can easily duplicate them and work this way as well. But I would like to clean up this scene a little bit. We've got too many random things, and show weight map painting. Let's use this mountain as an example. So move it here, and yeah. So this is a splat map that comes with the plugin as an additional thing you can download, and we will configure it to paint a weight map. So I will use it as a source here, and I know by heart the names of the forest needles. I think that's the name of the weight map. So I type it in, and as you can see, we now have this yellow weight map painted based on that flow texture. And this is very powerful, of course, because you can take that splat map information even for the entire level. We can do it on the mountain range as well, and paint the entire level.
From some other plugins is that those maps painted on our layer are weight blended, which is not a given with some of the tools. So that means they work just the same as they work when you paint them manually. So when you paint one of the weight maps, it removes all the other weight maps at the same place. In contrast to the non-weight blended weight maps where they're just on top of each other, which is harder to control inside the material, and you need to customize your material to handle that with some other solutions.
Yes, and in the meantime, I covered the entire landscape in that weight map. We could, of course, change it to any other weight map in real time. That would be fine.
And again, it's like changing 16 square kilometers of landscape and still having I don't know how many you have.
Square kilometers.
Yes. Oh yeah, 64 square kilometers. Sorry.
And also, aside from weight maps, we can also paint biome masks. I think we will show it a bit later, but it works this. Oh, actually, let's show it. Let's create a new biome mask. Let's say I will call it green, and I will use maybe the same, or maybe slightly different texture. And if we now go to visualize, and we look at it. Biome mask. Okay, it will
also click on it
in a moment.
The version, click on the green.
Okay.
Yes.
And yeah, you can see that it painted this biome mask. You can play with the contrast and so on, and you can use it in biomes. In our other plugin, we'll show it. You can use it to control the generation, and which is cool because if you move that mountain, it will move the biome mask with it, and you're not coloring the landscape, and it's more lightweight compared to weight maps. So it's a great tool for communicating between the landscape and biomes.
Yeah, usually you don't want to use weight maps for all of that metadata for communicating plugins, as the weight map needs to be used on the landscape material unless it will be optimized. But if it's used and not optimized, that means it impacts your runtime performance of your game. So that's usually you want to use biome mask if you want to just pass some metadata of place trees here, don't place trees here, or place only small trees in this area and things like this.
Oh, one last thing we can do is to actually spawn the player somewhere here, because this nicely shows the scale of what we are dealing with here. I think I just need to increase the loading range first and select some game mode. Yep, let's try. It's very easy to forget about the scale when, just flying around at like super high speeds. But now when you look at it, the crater itself is huge. And, so yeah, the fact that we can edit this landscape so quickly and easily is quite amazing. Okay, that's, I think, everything for the landscape part. And yeah, we could move to the biomes.
It just works. That's the thing about this. There's not that much to explain here. Like exactly how you would work your brush to be performant and just work by placing them as height maps on the level. That's what you get.
Yeah, insane. Before we hop over to the next plugin, if you don't mind, there's a couple questions specifically around this landscape one, if we don't mind tackling some of those super quickly.
Of course.
The first one here is from Thomas Franklin, and they're wondering, when you have the height level limitation and you have to extend it, if you build a game level, do you have to do anything to save the height, or is it automatic?
If you hit the limitation, if you just use that tool,
I think I understand. We modify the landscape, the same way as if you modified something in the landscape. So you just need to resave the landscape, and the, I guess, not even sure if brushes changed. Yeah, brushes change as well. Yeah, you just need to resave it, and that's it.
Yeah. If you save the level after this, it will work perfectly in the game. Those are changes that are saved offline for the landscape, as they are also, as we showed, this is all just into the layer inside the landscape. So this is not runtime editing of the landscape. None of that is cost inside the game. It is just as performant as your manual painting on the landscape.
Next question is from Alistair Morgan, and they're wondering if there are any issues with overlapping multiple of the landscape brushes when they're placed on the seams of the landscape proxies.
No, not at all.
I would say that most of these brushes you see here are placed on the seams of landscape proxies.
If you go into
no problem there.
You can select the proxies and show that basically like everything all the time is on the edges of landscape proxies, because they are, you need to go out of the landscape mode to be able to select them. So you see, they are so small. And as I explained before, when you're working, you just need to check out this landscape proxy and the brushes you're editing. The other person can still work on the other side of the map as long as they don't overlap their work on top of the proxies. So with big levels, that is, very, very helpful. You usually have multiple people working at the same time.
Very cool. Last question I have for you before we can hop on over to the next one. There's a question here wondering about kind of the limitations of the terrain. For example, like if holes could be put.
You got cut.
Did I?
I couldn't hear the question.
No, I had everything, so it was on. Yeah, it's fine.
Awesome. Can holes be made, like for example, a train tunnel going through a mountain?
Yep, as Daniel showed weight maps and biome masks and height maps, but you might have noticed with your keen eye when looking at the details panel that there's also a visibility mask option there. You can also, just as the same as you paint height maps, you can paint visibility masks. I don't know if you have material set up so to show it, because you need to have a material mask blend mode and having the landscape alpha passing into opacity. I don't think we have it set up on this level, but trust us, it was just fine. This is the place you set it up.
Yes, you can have brushes that only affect the visibility, even if you want to just move the holes around, and it's actually pretty useful.
Awesome. Last thing before we hop over, it's actually a request. They're wondering if you could just run around in the crater for a second with the player character so they can really get a sense of scale.
Inside of it? Like down here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Yeah. I mean,
That's
a few years ago,
that feels
would
like
be
a
the
whole
entire
level in
game.
and of itself.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it will take a while before I get to the other side. So
I don't think we need to. But a request is
probably
a request, you know. We need to do it.
Yeah, GTA free level inside of the crater. No, I'm joking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those
can we now?
first levels inside first like GTA 3 weren't as big as you remember them to be. I think they were like 4x4 kilometers or something like this. So it's not much more than this.
We could certainly fit one.
That's how spoiled we are right now, right? We are just creating those big levels and being like, it's too small. It's I cannot put whole Mount Everest in there, but. Back then, you needed to handle your 2x2 kilometers up.
Yep.
Incredible. All right. Well, there's some more questions here that I'm going to pocket for a little bit later. And I think we're ready to see the next plugin if you're up for it.
Okay. I will just save it in between. So the next plugin is Errant Biomes. And it's a plugin for procedural spawning of meshes, effects, grass, gameplay elements. You can see it in the video, how we generate things. And the plugin is very scalable. You can use it on huge maps and spawn like thousands and thousands of objects. It's a big part of the plugin runs on the GPU, similarly to Landscape plugin. And in the plugin, you can mix procedural workflow logic with manual data, like hand-painted masks, landscape weight maps, textures, metadata such as slope or height, volumes, and you decide what the logic is, how you combine all these inputs together. And you do it in the material editor. It's fully programmable. At the base level, it's very, very simple. Okay, another video, just close up how it looks. At the very basic level, you can even put a single node in there and you get some results, like this forest is generated with a single noise node. But you can also use other types of inputs, like this is based on the weight map, grass spawned on the green weight map. This is like a combination of texture sampling, just normal textures sampled, and some procedural magic. Then we have hand-painted masks. This is a system that we provide. You can use them to, in here in the video, we affect the mesh selection, not really density. So instead of normal tree, we pick this dead tree. And you have like advanced hand-painted mask features where even specific values of ranges of values can mean something in your pipeline. Like we here select one of many meshes, just changing the value of the mask, not even the mask. So it's up to you to decide how you want to use these features. We also have interspecies dependencies. So leaves, for example, spawn under trees or branches, pretty much like relation between various species. We also, like, most of the objects are spawned in offline mode, so no generation at runtime happens for them. They are then mesh instances and they render efficiently. But for dense objects such as grass, you can't do it, because if you try to generate all the millions of instances and save it in the map would be, gigabytes in size. That would be very impractical. So we provide what we call runtime spawning system that generates most of the data offline, but then compresses it, and when we play the game, it uncompresses some of the data and spawns these instances around the camera. So in here you can see that we made the video so that you can see how it generates. Normally, of course, it's more hidden, and it's based on the draw distance of these instances. So it works similarly to landscape grass, but it's way more flexible. You use the same workflows as for offline species in biomes. Yes, but you get runtime spawning. And we also have landscape adjustment. So spawned instances can affect the landscape. As you see here, it's quite common when you have these edge meshes visible. So Errant Biomes can raise or lower the terrain under these instances. In the future, we'll also be able to paint weight maps. So we'll be able to color that region as well. And we also have integration with PCG. So you can use biomes to manage degeneration, use the abstraction that it provides with sub-biomes and species and the hand-painted mask and all these features. But at some point you may pass over to PCG. It may read data from biomes, read the positions where biomes wanted to spawn objects, and then you can do even more logic on top, some bounding box checks, raycasts, and use PCG to spawn. And you can do it even per species. So some species may be spawned in Errant Biomes, some may be spawned with PCG. You have a lot of flexibility here. Let's jump to the editor. And yeah, let's initialize.
Yeah, maybe I'll go over some organization things that we have there, because that's what we'll start with. We split our assets into biomes, sub-biomes, and species, where the biome is basically a large area that you don't even select procedurally. This is something that you decide, like for your game, that this whole area is a mountainous region. This whole area is a big desert. That is something you would call a biome. Inside those biomes, you would have some biomes like forest inside the mountainous region, or like a field, things like this. And inside those sub-biomes, you have species will finally decide what type of objects to spawn on top of the level. So usually, grass, trees, but also any blueprints that you want to place, any berries you want to pick up in the forest. So it could be gameplay elements, lights, visual effects, whatever you really want. And biomes and species have procedural logic defined inside material graphs that Daniel showed before. And the cool thing about them is, I think, that they are still just material graphs. At the beginning, we explored creating our own graph editors for them, but that's artists are already familiar with working with materials and already have material functions created for them. So it is just a boon for us to rely on all of that knowledge that you already have.
Yeah, and I just showed a few things. One is that in biomes, despite working with a large landscape, you can work on a fragment, which is usually what you do when you tweak the settings. And by the time you finish, you regenerate a larger area. And we use the templates that we provide.
You can control that by word partition, but sometimes you want to have context of where you're working instead of just unloading part of the world, like the whole. One of the big reasons why we really want to move everything into Unreal, not into Word Machine and Houdini and so on, is just having this context of the map you're working on, which is completely lost when you're just making some procedural graphs inside a fake scene inside Houdini or something like this.
Yeah, I will show you a bit how the settings of a species look. So when we enter species, we can select the meshes that spawn, and we have this placeholder tree that I will now change. And you can have a few meshes here, but let me first select some tree. I guess this one, and you can have a number of them here, and define the probability of spawning of a specific tree mesh, or any mesh really, because it doesn't have to be trees, of course. We're just using foliage, but you can generate, I don't know, some high-tech metal junkyard or something. It's up to you.
Yeah.
So I will now.
You have one empty species slot. You forgot. You added species and you
no
didn't set
asset.
it up.
No?
Yeah, yeah.
This one. Okay.
Spawn anything you want. We can even have, which we'll go over later, some techniques for using blueprints as instances, which will be pretty cool to show.
Yeah, so this is the power of procedural generation, that you can very easily change things, change the meshes, and this also helps you in like optimizations because you can just apply the change to everything very quickly. So this species is using just a noise function with some parameters, and of course this is very basic, doesn't react to any of the landscape features. So we can now make it spawn where the weight map is, and we provide these nodes in the landscape material, so you can just select weight map, biomes weight map sample, and give it the name of the weight map, and we will now use this. So now you see that wherever we have this flow pattern, the yellow pattern of the forest needles weight map, we also get the forest. And right now the forest is using just that as an input. So I would say like not procedural at all. But you can also, of course, combine the two and do a bit of both. Like we could multiply these results, not results, the inputs, and apply, and you get a bit of noise and a bit of weight map input. You could do like 5 inputs there, which maybe we'll get to.
But I think it's also that all those graphs that you're creating are pretty isolated. So there's no single giant graph that describes logic for your whole level. Currently, it is also just a logic for single tree, but we can combine masks from trees, from other species into trees affecting like grass and things around it. But there's no single graph that you need to understand fully to make any changes. You can add new species, you can go into the graph and make changes to it, whatever you see fit. And you don't need to understand like the whole system together with that. We also split those masks into growth masks, scales, and so on, so you can modify only the things that you care about without concerning yourself with giant graphs that only your technical artists can touch, because the whole project will explode. So.
I'm also showing one feature where, as you see, we have some parameters in here. And then the question is, where do I modify the parameters if there is no material instance here? And you can do it through, we have these properties here that you can, this is mostly meant for teams where you have a tech artist or someone maybe tweaking the material, and then an artist or someone who maybe doesn't know how the material works but wants to tweak some values. They don't even need to enter the material, but you don't really need to use it if you don't want to. Okay, let's show another input, maybe a hand-painted mask. So this works the same way. It's very straightforward. I think it's just mask.
The hand-painted masks are like main way to modify how your procedural logic works by your artists. We focus really hard on this type of data being the main input, as we think this is one that is very easy to visualize and very easy to understand. Everyone is used to just painting masks in the level, so we put a lot of work into organizing those. There are really cool features coming in the next update that we unfortunately don't have on this machine installed, but stay tuned for it if you really wanted to have more organization options for masks.
Oh, I just forgot one node. I think it should be better now.
Been there.
Also apply the material. You didn't, apply the changes you make.
Yes, so the first thing we will use with the mask, because it's a very common use, is to be able to remove the generated objects So I created the mask remove foliage. In the material I also referenced it, used the remove foliage name, and I made it so that it multiplies, with inversion. So if this mask is, has value of 1, it will zero out everything else. And let's decrease the radius, maybe even more. Now we can do some painting here and regenerate. And as you can see, we removed that. And we don't have a mask which is, specifically for this purpose, because it's all up to you to decide. Because you can, for example, have a mask that only removes certain types of objects, maybe large objects, just large trees. Very useful when you have a bridge and you want to leave the grass but remove tall trees. That freedom is really useful. And but also we can of course create a mask.
Provide concrete solution, and some places where there is so much freedom to that you would need that it is always a trade-off. Where do you allow a lot of control, which means that people can get lost, or maybe it can be a bit technical, but and places where you provide the solution that this is how you do it and there's no other way, which hinders some possibilities, but also makes it a lot easier to use. So it's also always the challenge deciding which we should choose.
And now I created a mask for adding foliage. Let's see if I did it correctly. Yes. So yeah, as you can see, and we're now only affecting the growth of these species. They have also other properties that we could affect. If we go to the species, this is the growth section, but you also have scale, and this has its own mask that is right now just the value of 1. And we also have asset group. So in here you can pick one of many assets based on the output of this mask. I can just very briefly tell how that works.
And bigger teamwork with some people, working only on some parts of the whole and not needing to understand super complicated systems. We really want it to be simple for you to just go in there and check those maps. I think, Daniel, we could also show the debug option for them, so it's easy to visualize what you're making while you're making those changes.
Debugging is one of the things that you do, quite often as a developer. So having proper tools for that is very important. So right now I selected that I want to debug trees, the species of trees, and specifically their growth mask. And as you can see, this is where they want to be spawned, and they want to be spawned where that weight map is. That's why we see the flow pattern, and they really don't want to be spawned here.
Some invisible force of DA is making them not go there.
Yes, and you can debug other aspects as well. I'm thinking we could maybe show the inputs map to show other types of inputs quickly, without using one by one.
Sure, we can go over that. Or maybe before we do that, maybe let's also explain some other features like priority, because this is something that some other systems usually complicates the graphs a bit. If you want to have, for example, some species that normally grow everywhere, but also remove other species around them, usually that means that inside the graph you create a logic that you input one type of species, another one, and you say, well, it's this, remove all of those. We solve it by setting priority number for them. So species with higher priority will remove species with lower priority inside the given radius for them, basically. So if you want rocks to remove some objects, that's how you do it. And again, you don't need to modify any single giant graph to do it, right? And those trees, as we saw, removed some of those trees. We saw them disappearing.
we spawned quite many of these rocks, but as you can see, there are no trees growing inside these rocks. They just removed them. And so this is a few clicks away and just working out of the box. You don't need to do any graphs for that. Runtime spawning as well, we should show.
Yes, spawning in runtime. So as we said, the runtime spawning is just runtime spawning. It's not runtime generation. So you don't pay any cost for your graphs, for your grass and all the densely spawned objects. So you can go as crazy as you want in those graphs. This won't impact performance in game, which it's not the same with landscape grass, for example, as it needs to be fully calculated inside your material during the runtime. We only store some masks basically and some shared locations that will be then tiled for them to be used. Just basically we store as little data as we need just to be able to spawn them, but we don't store all the locations for them, as saving locations of all those grass objects instances being spawned will be gigabytes and gigabytes of memory. You won't be able to even load level with them really.
Yep, and I just instead of the empty biome, the sub-biome that we had before, we now have the grasslands sub-biome. So it grows between the forests. And as you can see, we spawned a lot of these placeholder grass meshes. And they are spawned around the camera, just quite far, so you don't see it spawning. But yes, and you can use the same logic for the grass as you do for large objects. You can do like patterns of flowers, mixed with grass and really anything here. And one other thing we
you
could
trying
show
to outrun the grass to show it spawning, but it's too fast for you. I saw it spawning. So believe it, it's spawning. This one is spawning in runtime.
Next thing we would like to show is interspecies dependency. Let's create some species that depends on another species.
Yeah, and again, here you won't need to add all of those species into a giant graph. You can just go into a single species and say, hey, I want to read data from that species with a single node.
Yes, one thing that I wanted also to explain is that species can be shared. So the sub-biome, let's say the forest, can have the same grass as the grasslands. Of course, usually, you may sometimes want to have a different grass in the forest, but nothing stops you from sharing these species. So there is first the sub-biome logic, and then there is the species logic kind of applied on top.
Some technical detail that they are very optimized for doing that. Yeah. So if you have the same species used in multiple sub-biomes or biomes, it's calculated only once, the whole logic for them.
Yeah, we actually didn't show it, but the same way as species have their mask that controls their placement, sub-biomes also have their mask. So if you wanted to control the forest, not like the specific tree species, because you could have 10 tree species in the forest, you can then do it for the sub-biome mask and maybe have some noises here and so on.
It's up to you to decide what's the best way of organizing that. Usually you would do as much as possible through the sub-biome mask, so it affects all the species inside it. Just try to think logically, usually just, this is a sub-biome of a forest, and inside the forest we have those species. And first you have a logic of where the forest even is, and then species have some logic of I like to grow in the light, I don't like to grow facing south, whatever. So, yeah.
I will now try to spawn something, maybe something obvious like a cube, where the trees are.
Yeah, maybe change the spacing a bit.
And yeah, it's as simple as other things where you just type sample and I think species. And we can now select from the drop down that we want to spawn where the species are. We'll connect it. I will actually save it maybe. Somehow Control S doesn't work for me. I think it's my AMD driver.
Oh no.
Which took the shortcut for
You can
these things.
save even you're inside those materials,
So-
it doesn't save because we have material inside the species. So Unreal doesn't handle saving like sub assets inside the asset. You need to save species, it will save the material automatically. That's why it was showing the save icon not changing.
Okay, it looks quite interesting. So as you can see, these cubes are placed where the trees want to be placed, and yeah, you can
and
see
we
that we
before
have
that they
lots
are
of them
using
here.
the needless weight map for placing, but the trees have bigger spacing. That's what we also see, those places where there's no trees, but they are cubes because they are so dense they can fit in those smaller places that are also then they are also not removed by rocks. That's why we also see them in some other places, but yeah.
Yeah, and as we are playing with cubes, we could show instanceable blueprints, I think.
Yeah, instanceable blueprints is a small feature that we have that allows you to use blueprints basically as prefabs where you organize assets in like relative transforms between them. So we have, for example, like some rock formation, and when you input it into biomes, it won't spawn them as the blueprint. It will extract all the meshes from inside and spawn them as instances. So they are just as performant as using any other mesh. We also support, of course, just placing blueprints, but you wouldn't want to have that many actors on the level usually placed. I mean, depending on how many of them you want, of course. Yeah, let's create some beautiful articulation.
And the top one will be tilted.
Such a bold move.
Very modern.
Yeah, and now
Inspired.
let's go to this decoration species. And instead of the mesh, let's select this blueprint. And so the species knows that this is an instanceable blueprint. Let's not go into
Because we
details
chose
why.
the class for the blueprint actor to be the instanceable blueprint one.
Yes.
We had that once, I think, before. Maybe the progress bar didn't appear. Let's
wait
give it
for
as
it.
a second. Somehow we got it like once, and it was also today. So it's surprising, we never seen that before. Like progress bar decided not to appear for some reason.
As long as there is no crash, I'm
If I
fine with a
just-
short wait.
So I wonder what was that.
I think so. We'll unfreeze, like hopefully. Okay. I don't know why it took longer than
Wow.
usual.
We made it.
If you now
no
look,
crash.
if you look, we spawned lots of cubes in that configuration that was done in the blueprint, and you can apply changes such as material changes to these instances. You can create like Adam said, rock formations and other things.
Yeah, and if you select them, you'll show that they are not individual actors on the level. They were properly extracted and they are part of the instance components.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to spawn like normal blueprints actor per each of these objects. That would be hugely expensive in terms of memory. This is very lightweight.
Complete with so many of them. I think we would probably crash before we finished
Probably,
placing
yeah.
so many actors as we place those.
Yep. There is also landscape adjustment that we could show. But I will clean up the scene a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, it will be hard to see with all those decorative cubes.
I will remove it. Maybe I will generate first.
No, just let's add it already inside the trees. But also we'll need to set up the landscape if you want to show the landscape adjustment. We need to create a
that's
dedicated layer for biomes that it will write into.
Yeah, unfortunately, something slows down with the instanceable blueprints. Is the UI? No. Okay, let's wait a second.
Maybe let's close all the asset windows that we opened. Maybe one of them is messing us for some reason. I had some problems. I think it was in 5.1, so I think it was fixed. But when you had opened the viewport inside the material editor, it was really chugging things down. So maybe the viewport inside the blueprint is somehow messing it up. I don't know.
One other thing I wanted to say, because it was easy to miss, is that you don't only use masks for controlling placement, you can also use volumes. So you can place volumes and then sample the location of these volumes or the area that they cover, and also remove or add foliage this way. We know that some people prefer volumes over masks, so yes, this can be done. Okay, I'm even thinking of killing Unreal, because it's not like we care that much about the exact shape of the scene. So let's just kill, and there's some.
That's always a live thing, you know. You can even prepare the same scene multiple times over, and then you get like random hangups, and you know. And maybe the keen viewers have noticed that we have a taskbar at the bottom. This is not because we don't know how to hide the taskbar. For some reason, we've hit a technical problem where if we enable auto hiding of the taskbar, the whole UI in Unreal starts lagging. So that's why we have taskbar at the bottom for the whole stream.
And then we weren't brave enough to try again before the stream. Okay, we're back at the reasonable state of the scene. Luckily, let's now go configure that. Let's go first to landscape. So we have a layer for manual edition, a layer for Errant Landscape, and we can add a layer for Errant Biomes. The name doesn't have to be that, but just for clarity. And here we need to type it. Okay. And if we now go to species, let's say the trees, we can define this align strategy, either per mesh or per entire groups of assets. And we can select, let's say, align to circle, some radius. Of course, note that landscape has a precision of 1 meter per pixel, so we are somewhat limited in terms of precision. And I think I of course applied something so that we can clearly see how it looks like 3 meter offset. And let's generate a bit. And you can see how every tree has this bump underneath, like 3 meter tall. And so you can use it to either raise or lower the terrain at certain instances.
It's also very useful on big rocks. If you have like big slopes and big rocks on big slopes, you adjusting like terrain underneath them can make them fit pretty well with landscape around them. For trees, it's for some meshes that have big like open meshes a bit below them, it's sometimes useful to have just the landscape alignment, just to fill all those holes that could show up.
Yeah, I thought I will at the end I will regenerate the entire map. So let's just wait a second, just to see
the big map,
all the forests.
Yeah. Yeah. So
and then we'll jump to. Okay, go on.
Yeah, so I think it's a good overview, and let's jump to Errant Paths.
We'll jump to Errant Paths. I just wanted one last thing to show on that other map, because it's a fast way to show how you can use different inputs. Okay, so we generated the entire map, that region where we have something to spawn, And yeah, if we now fly around the level, there is lots of trees on the level. Probably more than you could place by hand, than you would have patience to place by hand.
Okay. You can easily paint them, but the main thing is that you can now make easy changes to them. You can change all those trees. You can adjust things that grow around the trees and things like that. That is the strength here. So you might think that, hey, I'm painting things in foliage tool, so it is similar to, for example, using painted masks. But the control now that you have, that you already painted where they should be, and you can change all the assets and change how they relate to each other and how is spacing between them at any moment. That's the strength of this tool set, I would say.
Yeah, also splat maps come with these really natural patterns, and it's always good to use these patterns. It just looks more natural than often hand-painted objects. And of course, we're using, like, these are super basic species and subbiomes. Normally, you would take influence from height and all different other sources, slopes, to create natural behavior. But as you can see, even using a single splat map already gives you something interesting. But let's for a moment go to a different map. It shows different types of inputs that you can use in biomes. Yeah, so first off you have procedural, so just plain noise in here. Then you have spawning based on metadata. In this case, this is slope. It's just a single node. All of these examples are just, pretty much a single node. Then you have based on the weight map, which we saw on the other map, based on the texture. I can actually show you how that looks. Let's say if we go to texture example.
Yeah, finally we have some realistic examples here. Those are, that's how I remember trees growing, basically.
In a checker pattern, right?
Yeah.
This is a good example because there is nothing special about this graph. The only thing is that the node that we added just to help users, but you don't need to use it, just to help you, map to UVs, the landscape to UVs. But we are simply sampling a texture, and this is just standard material, and that's the output of it. Then another example is metadata based on height. So as you can see on the top of the mountain, we get less trees because they prefer not to grow there. That's how they are set up. Can I show it? That's also like a very simple setup, just a noise that's just a node that we provide. You can also create your own logic, and yeah. It. And we have masks that we showed before, so a mask that removes objects and a mask that adds objects. And so you can use these inputs. You can use some more of the inputs, some splat maps as well. In the future, we would like to calculate even more things in the plugin, things like erosion, this kind of stuff, so that you could just shape things and then get foliage to spawn, interesting patterns without too much hassle. Okay, and I think that finishes the part about biomes.
Very cool.
If we have any questions, we could...
Perfect. I was gonna say I have just a couple that I can ask y'all before we move on. The first one that I've seen pop up a couple different times is they're wondering how well does it transition between different kinds of biomes, like from deserts to snow to wooded forest, plains, all that.
Right now, it's kind of up to you to do this transition yourself. So, for example, you could have some transitional subbiome between them that has both of the species that you want to blend between and place them between them, because currently, like when the one subbiome ends, the other one begins. We want to provide some better tooling for that. For example, easier way to maybe check inside species if you're on the edges of some subbiome to do some other logic with that. So currently when we do blending of subbiomes, we do it by, just as I said, having some transitional stages. For example, if you need to have it really gradual. But also quite often you don't even need that really, because you have some species that just grows on the, for example, if the value of the mask is lower, so you can use that to place something that is more transitional. So for example, grow smaller trees when you're on the lower values of your forest map, and you'll have those nice trees falling off like the smaller trees, and you can also select like smaller trees to grow on this site, and it will look like the nice gradual fall off of the forest, even though basically you're just cutting off from one subbiome to another one. So it will just depend on how you set up your species to how it is visible. Though we do recognize that as something that in some occasions needs a lot of work from users to create those, for example, transitional subbiomes, and we want to have something that works out of the box.
Very cool. Next question we have is kind of in regards to if editing anything that was procedurally generated would be possible during runtime. So I think the example that was given was like a survival game, for example, if someone wanted to go in and actually cut some of the trees down.
Yeah, that is a question we get quite often. It is possible because Unreal allows you to, for example, detect which instance you're raycasting at and get the instance like index, and you can just hide it or remove it. But we certainly want to. There is an lightweight instances system in Unreal that handles such things for you. But we had heard from some of our clients that they have problems with implementing it and has problems with working out some issues around it. So we know that we will provide some tooling exactly for that later on. Currently, it is possible, but it is on you to do it. But we will provide ready-made solution that will replace instances into actors, for example, when you get near to them, just to cut them.
Awesome. Yeah, that's.
I would also like to add two words to that. Sorry, we do not provide a solution for that out of the box. That requires some work on your side, and it's technically not part of the plugin, but we would like in the future to provide a solution so that people don't have to do it, because it's quite a common request.
I feel like that's always one of the first questions, right? Whenever people see a full forest, they want to know how easy it is to then go in and mess it up. So
if you want to implement it and don't know how, just go to our Discord and we'll help you.
Perfect. There we go. Awesome. I think those were actually, there's one more. Wait, no, never mind. We answered it. Never mind. We're ready to move on.
Okay, so I used that time to load another map, and we can transition to slides and to our third plugin. So the third plugin is Errant Paths. It is for creating roads, tunnels, railways, pipeline, fences, power lines, pretty much anything that is based on splines. And the power of this plugin is that it's intuitive to edit, when in some other plugins for roads you just add new meshes, but then by hand you adjust the location in properties and some numbers. In our plugin you do it inside of blueprints, so it's visual editing. Another thing is that it's rule-based spawning. So for example, you could spawn certain things just in sharp turns or on slopes, and you can use these rules to automatically place barriers, decals, road signs, tunnels. all kinds of things like leaves in the forests or snow. And that means that the path adapts to the environment, and also the path can adapt the environment, so can affect the landscape shape, can color the landscape with weight maps, can paint biome masks so that it affects foliage. Like we see in the video, it removes the foliage, cuts through the forest, and you can also add biomes. And we also provide, we also provide a blueprint API so that you can build on top of our tools. For example, you could take real-world data from maps and generate our paths based on that data, and then connect these roads together and so on. And we also plan integration with PCG in the future. And the plugin is currently in closed beta. Some companies have access. We are, still in intense development, fixing things and bugs, and the performance isn't there yet. But we still wanted to show it because paths in general are a very interesting problem. And so here is an example of how these sections look. You can see like these small parts of the road. You can edit them inside blueprints. You can then structure them into layers. So let's say if the first layer would be asphalt for a normal road, the second could be lane markings, then another cracks, potholes, and so on. So it's like elegantly organized. And then you have the control. You can either spawn entire group of templates. We call them path templates, these sections. So let's say everything that is related to a tunnel, or you could spawn a specific section of a tunnel, or you could spawn a specific mesh inside of these templates, like we show here, like a barrier spawns only when some condition is fulfilled. However, when working on that, we discovered that it's very hard to work with a black box when something doesn't spawn and you don't know why. And so we introduced like a visualization in the halfway, and we call it labels. Labels store that condition that they check. So for example, you could have a label that marks the sharp turns, and it has the condition like, is the current point inside of a sharp turn? And then you have this visualization that you can check that the label actually works. So if my mesh isn't spawning, maybe it's for some other reason. And these meshes contain very simple logic. You simply override one function and you either say it's fulfilled or it isn't. And that controls whether the label is there. And for example, here we have a label that just checks the turn radius. If it's greater than 0, we have a right turn. And these labels can also reference each other, so like nested labels. For example, here we have a right turn and a sharp turn. These two conditions, when they are met, we say that the label sharp right turn is fulfilled. So we can compose these labels together into more and more complex logic, but each step of that nested logic you can evaluate and see if it's properly working for your case. And then once they calculate, if you don't like the outcome, you can always tweak it manually, like we do here. We just painted a bit of extra, and we regenerate the road, and then the barrier spawns there. So this is the part of this manual control that we always try to provide, so that you benefit from procedural generation, but it never stops you from doing what you want. We also do landscape adjustments, as I said before. We can paint weight maps, so you can do dirt roads. You can spawn decals and small meshes also. You can paint biome masks, as I said before. Here's an example of removing foliage. And here's an example of adding foliage, so just adding a biome on the side of the road. And let's now go to Unreal. The scene loaded. It's a heavy scene with lots of nanite meshes. And it's actually also an example of using biomes, because it's all generated with biomes. And yeah, we have lots of things here. And let's go to one of the paths. So for example, we have this bridge here. And if we now... Okay, I'll first show you the main asset that describes the path. So we'll be working on UI, of course, even more, because it's still work in progress, but Here you have a group with templates for asphalt. So you can, these are elements that make up for the normal road. So asphalt road, some lane markings and cracks and guardrails. And then you have a group for the tunnel with some templates that make up the tunnel. Then you have a group for the bridge. You could have a number of them. That road could even turn into a dirt road in some conditions, or could get covered in snow. It's really up to you. And you can apply certain conditions to the entire group, or the template, or a mesh. In here, let's say we apply a condition for the whether something is underground, for example. It's actually, we don't want it underground in here. It's negated. And that's how you create this logic. And now if we go to one of these templates, we won't be going through here because we have quick access through here. And we go, let's say, to this bridge support template. So as you can see, it's like very visual. It's part of that of that road. And let's say we modify one of the pillars here. Let's do it like that. Yeah, we can compile it, and let's regenerate the buff.
Yeah, and again, it is split into multiple assets, so you can have some people working, defining how the bottom of the bridge should work, while still another person could be working on how the top of the bridge should work together. So you can have multiple artists working on different parts of the road without disturbing each other. Some people could be defining at the same time how the road markings should be placed. Is it sharp right there or not, and things like this. So again, we try to split it so the team can work efficiently together without disturbing each other, really.
Yeah, it's the first time we generate right now, though some textures are loading and so on. But as you can see, now that it generated, it's a pretty long road. We have this change that we made, and that was very visual. You could understand what you were doing, and we modified the template very easily. Another example is if we, let's say, wanted to add something here. Let's say to the asphalt road, and we could just this could be a decal, but we can add just a cube to make it very visible. Maybe I'll make it full screen. And let's find our section here. It's actually harder than usual. Oh, because I used the wrong mesh. Okay, that explains it. Yeah, we have our own version because we provide some extra properties for meshes which are inside the templates. So in here we can say that, for example, I didn't select the mesh again. Okay, and now Errant Paths. We can do things like maybe multiply it by 10, like spawn it in 10 copies, but every time give it 50% a chance of spawning, and maybe we can give it some random location offset this way. And this is how you could do some.
Yeah, you could imagine that we are placing some decals and road destruction currently. So you don't want to place them manually inside your roads. You want to just randomly sometimes place a road crack in the road. So those cubes will be a representation of that, let's say.
Yeah, and what we're waiting for is some labels that you do raycasting. That's why they take a lot of time right now. But yeah, we didn't even do a pass of optimization yet. So yeah, we have to be a bit patient. But yeah, you see how that works. We have lots of cubes on the road, and we could of course apply some procedural logic on top. I think I have a field of view changed. Oh, that will be easier. Yeah, so
let's
very
go show
easy
some labels.
Yeah, let's show off some labels. So when you click on the road and enter the labels mode, you have these labels. For example, we can show all of them. Unfortunately, no way to show all of them at once. yet.
This is one of the
But
coolest thing, I think, like them showing up as those lines above your roads, and they are representing the places where the logic passed the test for it at those places.
yeah, where it's fulfilled. For example, here we have a label that is called interval, and it is true every X meters. So you can see this small, small, I don't even know how to call that. Graphs. Then we have this label which is marks parts where we are above the ground, and if we move here, you see that this label isn't fulfilled here anymore. And so based on that, we spawn this bridge. And I can show you how such a condition looks. If we now go to that label, to the logic of it, we have this one function which is called isFulfilled. It only returns a bool. And this one is one of the more complex ones because it does a line trace. We provide the function, but you can do any logic here that you want. And it just simply trace array downwards to find how far the landscape is. And if the landscape is more than 4 meters below, we consider it being above the ground. And one other cool thing is that it can also output debug information. So, and we then print it in this view. Sorry, not this one. So if we enable the debug and we zoom in, we see that every point prints like distance above geometry, and you can this way see if it's really working. Whoops, something. Look.
Maybe you press some Control Alt and it's like pressed.
Maybe let's zoom in this part.
Try
just
pressing all the modifiers, and maybe it will unstack. I have that sometimes.
Like you see here. Here it just considered like 1 meter above the terrain, so no reason for the bridge. Let's hide a bit of these labels. We have a bit too many of them. You can do the same for, let's say, if we look, we can go to a different spot. And also, when you have these labels, you can also draw debugs. We actually draw debugs in this function, and we only draw them when that debug is enabled. So you can draw these rays and so on. I could actually probably enable that and see if that... we need to force regeneration because we didn't change anything.
It's very important to have many ways to represent the logic that you're making when you're making such procedural graphs everywhere. I think that's one of the coolest things in Paths, that not only they allow you to set up this logic, but also visualize all that stuff.
Yeah, you can see all these rays, the red points hitting the landscape. This is how we measure, and now you can see why it's slow. We're firing hundreds of rays right now. It's not optimized at all. Yeah, and let's show some other example. Maybe this is a good one. I will show it in a different place. Maybe instead of here. Let's go to a different road. This one I think is a good example. So here we have lane markings. As you can see, like broken line here. Then it switches into like solid broken line, double line, and back to broken line. And this is also controlled by labels. If we now select this path, but first I should probably remove the changes I made to the asphalt with the cube. Now if you look at it, we have a label called right turn and also the one called double solid line, and they are, in terms of procedural logic, they are fulfilled here, but we modified them manually and we removed them from here. I can show you how that works. We can paint manually on that label. We can also restore it to the original state, or we can say that we don't ever want it here. Lost focus. And now I will clear these manual additions in these labels, and I will regenerate that path.
Yeah, I find those labels super cool every time I see them, really. Just having those cool little lines representing where the logic is fulfilled. This one It's really ingenious.
And you can see how now we have double solid line here. And yeah, so we mix procedural logic and manual control. And also wanted to show some other in a moment. Yeah, the double solid line is a good example of nested labels. So first off, we place the double solid line markings when we are in a sharp turn or when we are underground. So tunnels are covered fully with double solid line. But also, if the turn is sharp but then transitions to, let's say, normal turn, we try to continue double solid line because it just looks weird. If in real life that's how they look. So we check if another label is fulfilled, or maybe if it's fulfilled nearby within some range. And then if we have two turns with a short section in between, like short straight line section, we also don't want a broken line in between with just a single broken line. So if we have a short gap between the double solid lines, we also glue them together, and that's a condition that we have in that label, and it outputs the value here. The tunnel, the problem with the tunnel is just the entry that we didn't. Actually, there's some grass piercing it. This is a very short tunnel.
Yeah,
but maybe we can.
With some
this one is longer. We need to fix the.
Yeah, that's a very hard topic, because really, if we could go for a few hours explaining how you could make entrance to the tunnels procedurally with landscape that has only 1 meter precision and things like this. We really need to do a lot of work on it.
Yeah, a tunnel is a nice example that you can also spawn other types of components. In here, we're spawning a light source together with the mesh, and of course a bunch of other meshes and some random objects that are placed here and there. And okay, so we looked at the roads that we already had placed. Let's create a new one. So we go to the create mode. You can create a new. Okay, we pick one of the roads. Normally in your say in your game you will have a few types of roads, and you just pick one, or maybe you have one road which is simply universal, just works everywhere, and maybe you control it through labels. Let's say a road that converts into a highway smoothly. Okay, let's create one road. You can also create it from selected splines or from landscape splines.
Yeah, which is really useful when you're converting from some other systems. Maybe you already covered the whole map with landscape splines, for example, but you need now more procedural control on top of it. So you can just convert them with one click.
Yep, I'll create some simple shape. And let's remove that first point. We can raise the middle a bit. And let's regenerate. Oops, misclick. Have it selected, okay. We also have options for connecting roads, merging them together, and so on, but we won't be showing these. They aren't very exciting, and we want to focus on the interesting parts. So as you can see now, the road intersects with all the foliage that we had here, and we can try to use this button to clear it up. Let's see if that works.
I'm communicating with Errant Biomes by writing data for it that the logic can use. And
requesting an update, yes, in Errant Biomes. And we removed the foliage around the road, and as you can see. And I can show you also a bit in like debug visualization. If we go to landscape, because right now we communicate through a weight map with these with biomes, and if we go here and we show layer debug, and we select these two weight maps that we use, you can see that we are removing all foliage where the yellow visualization is, so grass and also trees, and we will remove large foliage where the green color is. So under the bridge, we are removing only the large foliage, but leaving the grass. And we could have, of course, even more logic, like medium-sized objects and so on.
Even the fact that we can write multiple weight maps is not a given with some tools, and sometimes the limitation of writing one weight map can hit you very hard later in the project. But you can just write how many ever you want.
Yeah, and one interesting bit in how we implement this specific road, because you can do it, using the standard way, but we use the runtime virtual textures, which means that all the decals that we spawn, and we could spawn 10 times as many decals and dirt and extra stuff and lane markings, they are first rendered into the runtime virtual texture and only then into the road. And this is a perfect example, I think, of using RVT, because roads have small surface area, so you don't need lots of virtual texture fragments to store that information. And also when you drive across these roads, you have time to load in all the render these parts of the runtime virtual texture. So yeah, we think it's a very interesting way that solves the big problem of rendering thousands of decals with transparency on roads. But you don't have to do it. You can spawn objects normally, and the roads, the paths plugin doesn't force you in any way.
Yeah, you can use old-fashioned if you want. You can really use whatever you want. You can use spotlights with projection of some light shine. If that's how you want to do your decals. I'm not judging you.
Yes, let's go to a few more slides to discuss performance. So we are using spline meshes here to be able to create any kind of shape for the road, but spline meshes have a problem that Unreal doesn't support instancing for spline meshes. And so instancing works in a way that you render hundreds of objects with a single draw call, and with spline meshes, each of them is rendered with a separate draw call, which is expensive. But there is no real reason for it not to have instancing, so we will implement it before we release the plugin or slightly soon after, so to remove that limitation. Also, of course, for static meshes, we spawn instances, and also if we discover that a spline mesh was spawned as a straight line, we also convert it to static mesh, because even if once we implement instancing, it will be still slightly faster to spawn static meshes. Then RVT is a great way to render lots of decals. We also have an interesting thing where you can customize these warnings that we provide for things that artists often forget to set, such as draw distance. And you can often ruin the performance of a level with just a bunch of meshes that you forgot to configure fully. And it's really impossible to blame anyone. It's just impossible to remember. So we added these warnings. You can disable them or disable per template, but they are really helpful in keeping everything tidy. And also we need to split large or long roads into chunks for streaming, so that you load it at smaller amounts or smaller number of objects. And in general, of course, we need to improve the performance of the plugin in editor, the generation performance. And shortly about the roadmap, we want to introduce an interactive mode, which works a bit like PCG, that you make changes to the properties and it regenerates in the background mesh by mesh, and you can fully navigate in the editor while it's happening. We also have pathfinding, which we didn't show today. It's very interesting. It's not finished yet, but it works in a way that you first define a spline, like a guiding spline for pathfinding. So the suggested path, it can even be just a start and end, like a straight line, but you can also bend it to the side. Maybe you want the road to go on the right side of a mountain. And then you also give it a set of penalties. Let's say the penalty for being away from that guiding line, or the penalty for a road being very long, or penalty for sharp turns or going underneath the ground. So you can think of it as an engineer planning a road and trying to minimize the cost of the road while also accounting for certain like preferences. So for example, highway can't have sharp turns, even if that's the least costly way of building it. So the pathfinding can take this into account. And once you run pathfinding in the plugin, you can then tweak the path manually as well. Another subject is intersections. We didn't show them today. We're still working on them. We got to a point where we can bend intersections and specific like parts of them and legs. However, there are many challenges regarding how to deal with objects that are influenced by multiple parts of the intersection and all the decals and so on. So we will show it once it's nice and ready. We're also working on handling of cables and attachments, where you can have first of like the cable component attached between let's say as you see here in the poles, or you can have just straight line, maybe static meshes, maybe it's like a steel rope in the bridge that you could also connect. And we will also work on integration with PCG to give you even more control. And I think that concludes the presentation and the demo.
Awesome. Oh my gosh, there's so much incredible tech and possibilities with this. I mean, you basically showed us how to just build a whole world within a couple of hours, and that's incredibly impressive. So thank you so much for
Some
doing
people
that.
would say, yeah, some people would say that there are no cliffs and no rivers or something. That they will maybe come in other plugins, or rivers maybe will be done as part of paths. But yeah, there are some elements still left to, have tools, all the tools we need.
Yeah. I am so excited. I mean, if this is what you've done already, I can't even imagine what the next steps are. So the possibilities are endless. We have a handful of questions left over from earlier on that I'm going to toss your way if you're up for that. And then I figure at the end here, we can also walk through the process of anyone who might be interested in actually getting their hands on these plugins themselves. But before we do that, got a couple questions your way. First one is, and these might kind of bounce back and forth a little bit between the different plugins. So answer in
That's
whatever way you see fit. So first is from Not the Tech Guy, who is wondering, how seamless is manually painted terrain interaction with the brushes and stamps?
It's completely seamless. You just paint on another layer. For sculpting the height maps, there's absolutely no problem. There are some limitations for painting weight maps, because Unreal can only add weight maps between the layers. So if you want to have weight blending between weight maps, you need to do it on one layer only without having it painted on multiple weight maps. It is the same even if you don't use Errant Landscape. Even if you go currently and paint weight map on multiple layers, you'll have problems with weight blending. So that's the only limitation, but that's not really part of the plugin, let's say. Though we want to provide a solution for that. As we said, all clients usually use just our brushes for everything on the landscape. So we want to also provide a way for them to manually paint inside the brushes that they can later move. So you have a brush placed on the level, you have those extents, and you can paint manually in those extents, and then later move it with all of the other brushes around. So that could also work around the limitations of the weight maps currently, as you would do everything at one layer, without needing to use multiple ones, so it would blend properly. But sculpting, no problem. You can just go on the layer below, above, everything will work correctly.
Awesome, very, very cool. Next question here is from Lucas, who is wondering, so currently landscape splines don't work very well with world partition. Does Errant Paths work with that system?
Yes, absolutely. We're testing it with word partition all the time, and there's no issue there.
Very cool. Errant FHD is wondering, is it possible to have hard edges for textures, or does the resolution of landscape resolution still limit them?
The resolution, if you're talking about the biomes, for example, the resolution currently is tied to the landscape. So you would have only like usually 1 meter resolution, but this is something we are quickly moving towards removing this limitation. So you could set any resolution you want for your masks. And also upcoming in the future is some ways of calculating not masks, but working on positions where you wouldn't have any limitations of hard edges. Yeah, currently it is a limitation, but soon it won't be.
And if you really need it, like up to a centimeter precision, you could use PCG for that last bit to just perform like some last test now with biomes.
You can also use bounds, for example, if you need such precision. Instead of using masks, you could place some volumes. You can pass volumes inside biomes, and you use that for higher precision. Though in the end, it will be put into another mask, so that might also limit your precision. But usually, that will be enough for most cases. But yeah, this is a limitation, and we know of it, and we are working to solving that.
Very, very cool. Let's see here. Daniel, if you're comfortable disclosing, of course, do you mind letting them know what the specs are of the system that you were doing everything on was?
It's like a latest, I think, i7 or i9, actually, I don't remember. Maybe even i9. It's a powerful computer, that's for sure. We aren't using full power of it right now, and we have a powerful GPU also. We really like it because it has 32 gigs. We are using 16 right now. Lots of it is like the level itself, not really our tools. The level is quite lots of objects and so on, and Nanite as well.
But to load a lot of levels, we optimize how long how calculations go, but you cannot go around the limit of your memory. If you don't have enough memory to load the level, you won't be able to generate. So buy a lot of RAM, buy GPU with a lot of RAM if you can. But for example, I'm working just on a regular 8 gigs GPU usually every day, and as long as I don't load 16 times 16 kilometers landscapes, I'll be fine.
Awesome.
Yes, it's pretty much a convenience thing where if you have, let's say, like a normal GPU, you probably can work like up to like 8 by 8 kilometers or something around that. If you have a beefy GPU, you can load even more and just have it loaded all the time. Stability and so on.
It also depends a lot on your meshes that you're using. With Nanite, it's quite easy to overlook the amount of memory you're using because you're putting all those, hundreds of megabytes per mesh.
Yeah, in general, we are not really using like too much extra memory. Most of the stuff we allocate is temporary. Like by the time it's finished, the operation is finished, it's freed. So we don't use extra memory, but even having just an extra edit layer consumes memory. So that will be even beneficial to get rid of that extra layer. And there are some things that we can't work around, and we can't fix. We can work around. And we do have a button for like clearing the memory in case have too many things. But
we do
there's only so much we can do.
Especially in landscape, as landscapes use a lot of memory when they are bigger. We compared to using the base Unreal Landscape, we, for example, never keep all the MIP maps loaded. As you move away from some area and stop editing them for some time, I think it's like 60 seconds. We allow Unreal to just remove all the MIP maps, for example. So we try in the background to all the time minimize the memory usage that as possible.
Awesome. All right, last question I have for you is from Cold, and they said, you guys said it took a lot of time to build the different plugins. What was the most technically challenging part of building all of this, in your opinion?
I think it's always not things that you would expect. For example, like you would think maybe that in biomes the procedural generation is the hardest part. No, this is like the easiest part that was done in a few months. The long tail of basically optimizing user workflow, creating all the UIs, making sure that that you don't break anything you've already made while adding new features, and adding all those new like small features that maybe someone will need, but only in some cases. We are working with a lot of studios, and we are getting a lot of requests that might seem not that useful when you are starting out. But when you are further and further into the projects, you start seeing things that become a burden as you're working with a big team on a big map with a lots of assets on a giant map that you wouldn't even expect. And just solving those little issues takes a lot of time, and it just adds up really over time. I wouldn't say there was a single the hardest.
Yeah, continue, sorry. I agree fully, but I would also say we do spend some time on core features, but so much time goes into just managing these little things that when you copy something there, something breaks, the UI, just organizing UI is such a challenge always. You give like more and more options and controls to the user, but you try not to overwhelm them. So then you need to keep reorganizing that. So much effort goes into this. And I would say just looking at the plugins, you will probably underestimate by a factor of like 10 how much work goes into it. And we also, of course, underestimated it at the beginning. And I remember even a point where we thought, oh, we are almost ready. Like we should release quite soon. And then a year later, we barely managed to get it ready for the release. Like it's just unimaginable how much work goes into that day by day.
Yeah, I can only imagine, especially with the just amount of features that are available in each one individually. And of course, with it also being a sort of living project with things constantly being added to it as well, I can only imagine.
Yeah, it's been a few years, and during that time, new systems were introduced. We had to redo some systems, got new ideas how to implement some things. So many things changed, and we have to keep up with the progress of Unreal, new versions, then our progress, requests. It's super intense.
We started back at Unreal 4, so in the meantime we moved, to word partition, to one file per actor, all those changes. So you go from, word composition to word partition, so everything changes basically, how you manage your assets and how to do all that, and it all adds up.
Yeah, even when you see in Paths how you can edit things in the blueprint, you can take it for granted. You normally do edit things through the blueprint, but it has nothing to do with how you normally do it. Like we have to extract information from the blueprint, analyze the relations between these objects. I could go on for like 10 minutes on all the details and stuff that happens underneath and how much code is needed to handle that. Just so that you could move that mesh, easily.
Expect what's really hard. For example, just placing objects on splines in hierarchies on top of each other. That sounds like, you just place it in a spline and you place objects that are just, bent. What's the problem there? But when you bend the mesh and need to also place another mesh that was placed on this mesh exactly in the same place it was
can also
before.
Be bent. Yes. Bent meshes on top of bent meshes mixed with static meshes, just a nightmare on many levels. Even getting the math, for that. Anyway, yeah, it's challenging.
This is good. This felt therapeutic.
You just went and explain this feature. We would tell a story basically, but we could just sit here all day and tell stories of development basically.
Yeah, I think when you try to develop something like that, you very quickly run out of that optimism, early developer optimism. Like, yeah, this will only take that long. We multiply everything by 5 out of whenever we do estimations, even if that seems unreasonable, and it almost always takes 5 times as much. And so, yeah, that's just the reality of development.
Yes, definitely. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today and walking us through all of these different plugins that you have. Before we wrap up, would you like to kind of walk through your website and show anyone who's interested where they can get the plugins for themselves?
Yeah. Let's jump to my screen for a moment. As I type in the URL. Did we jump to the stream? I guess not yet. Yeah, so you go to errantphoton.com, and this is our website, and you pretty much click on the free trial, and you give us scrolling. You give us a few details so that we know, kind of what you're working on. This helps us in development, and you get access to the plugins. And for paths, you would need to message us. For now, we give it to companies because we get a lot of useful feedback from larger teams. Over time, we will do a public beta. And you can also find us on Unreal Marketplace. And this will still lead you to this website, but maybe it's easier for you to remember to just go to Unreal Marketplace, type Errant or just Landscape or Biomes, and you will find us there as well. I thought I maybe show it. Marketplace. Yes, assuming you don't remember the name, which is quite easy, let's just type Biomes, maybe. Oh, I used the wrong search, I guess.
Oh, it's such a sneaky search.
Yeah, there's so many.
And as you can see, at least for me, this is the first thing that shows up. Maybe it's just Epic being nice. But this is us, and you can also find Errant Landscape if you type in Landscape. Yeah, that's it.
Awesome.
Yeah, somewhere there, I guess. Anyway.
Yes.
All right.
Here it wasn't.
Fantastic.
Guts of the search bar weren't that nice here.
It's only Biomes. That's all.
Anyway, so. Yeah.
Yeah. So Tina, thank you for having us today. It was a pleasure, and share it with, other developers. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Of course. It was my pleasure to have you guys on. I mean, the work that you have poured into this it's incredible, genuinely. And I'm really excited to see what people can build with tools like this. So thank you for putting it together and putting it out there so that others can utilize it in their own projects. And yeah, I thank you for coming on too, because it's I know streams can be a bit of a time crunch sometimes, so I appreciate the time and patience for y'all coming on here. But yeah, and also, of course, thank you everyone who came to watch the show as well. It wouldn't be what it is without you and your participation and your questions. So thank you all for being here and being part of the show just as much as we are as well. If you hopped in a little bit later, no worries. We post all of our streams in video format that can be viewed on demand on both our Twitch and YouTube channels at Unreal Engine. You can also keep up with us on all of our socials at Unreal Engine as well. And if you'd like the latest news, as well as just meeting other developers, finding tutorials, pretty much anything you could ever need that's UE related specifically, come on and over to our forums where you can get access to basically everything that we have to offer you. So if you're not already over there, make sure you come over and hang out. It's a good time, I promise. And yeah, we have another UELFG episode tomorrow. We're going to have on Zuko, the solo developer behind Mix Universe, as well as a couple members of our audio team to talk about some of the tech that's powering part of that. So make sure you come around for that. And we'll be on our regular schedule next week as well. So come hang out then too, if you got the time. But with that, one last big, huge thank you to Adam and Daniel for coming on today. And we'll see the rest of y'all later. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.